The little black girl hid behind a fallen log, calling the biker as heavy boots crushed the leaves nearby. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's begin. The cold wind whistled through the trees as the fading sunlight barely pierced the thick canopy above. In the distance, you could hear the soft rustling of leaves being crushed by heavy boots. They were coming closer, and the little black girl knew they were looking for her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she huddled low behind the fallen log, clutching her knees tightly to her chest. Her breath was shaky, and her tear-filled eyes scanned the dimming forest for any sign of safety. She had to keep quiet. She had to stay hidden. If they found her, she knew what would happen next. The fear of being found was overwhelming, but there was something else that fueled her courage. She knew someone was out there, someone who could help. She had heard the sound of the motorcycles earlier, the deep rumble of the engines cutting through the air like thunder. The bikers were close. They had to be, but would they find her in time? The girl's name was Maya, and just hours earlier, she had been running for her life. After months of abuse from her stepfather, she had finally gathered enough courage to escape, slipping out in the dead of night and running into the woods. She had no plan, no destination, just the raw instinct to survive. Her stepfather, a man with a cold and ruthless demeanor, had caught wind of her disappearance, and she knew he would stop at nothing to find her. That's when she heard the motorcycles. The sound of the bikes had filled her with a flicker of hope. She knew who they were. She knew they would protect her. Maya had heard stories about the bikers. They weren't like the people who had hurt her. They were different. They were a family that looked out for each other, no matter the cost. They rode through towns helping those in need, bringing justice where it was most needed. And tonight, Maya needed them more than ever. As the boots grew louder, she quickly pushed the thought out of her mind. She couldn't let herself get distracted. She had to stay hidden. But then, just as she thought she couldn't take the tension anymore, she heard a voice. It was low and steady, cutting through the air like a calm before the storm. Maya. The voice called softly, barely above a whisper. We're here. We've got you. Relief flooded her chest. She didn't know how they found her, but the moment she heard those words, she knew she was safe. The bikers had arrived. The rustling of leaves and the crunching of boots came to a halt. There was a brief pause, and then, the sound of heavy engines revving as the bikers made their way toward her. Maya held her breath, knowing that her life was about to change forever. In that moment, she felt a spark of hope ignite inside her. She wasn't alone anymore. The bikers were here, and they were going to make sure she was safe. The only question left was how her stepfather would respond when they came face to face with him. Would he back down, or would he bring the fight to them? The bikers were ready. And so was Maya. I am here, Maya. We've got you. As the sun began to set, Maya stood in the small, quiet corner of the bikers' compound, surrounded by the comforting hum of the motorcycles and the steady voices of the men who had taken her in. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She wasn't hiding anymore, and she wasn't running. The heavy weight that had burdened her heart for so long was beginning to lift, and the anger, the fear, the trauma, while still there, was starting to fade into the background. The bikers had kept their promise. They had taken her out of the woods, away from her stepfather, and given her a place to stay, to heal. As Maya stood by the fire pit, watching the flames dance in the evening breeze, she was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. The leader of the bikers, the man who had helped her the most, approached her slowly, his boots crunching the gravel underfoot. "How are you doing?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Better," Maya replied softly, looking up at him. "I think I'm finally starting to believe that it's over." The biker nodded, his face hardening with a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "It's not over yet," he said quietly. "Not until we make sure you're safe for good." Maya's stomach tightened as she looked at him. She knew what he meant. The fear that had haunted her since the day she ran away had not disappeared completely. Her stepfather was still out there, and she had no idea what he would do when he realized she was gone. The biker, whose name was Jack, seemed to read her mind. "Don't worry," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle him." Maya gave him a small, grateful smile. She knew that Jack and the other bikers would keep their word. They had proven it already. As Jack walked away, Maya took a deep breath, trying to push her fear aside. She couldn't keep living like this, always looking over her shoulder, always running. But how could she move forward when her past was still chasing her? Later that night, the bikers gathered around a large table in the garage, their voices low as they discussed their plan of action. Maya was sitting nearby, listening in. Jack looked around the room at his brothers and sisters, his face set with determination. We have to make sure that he knows we're not going to back down. We don't just protect our own. We protect anyone who needs it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. They had all made sacrifices for one another in the past, and they were willing to make whatever sacrifices were necessary to make sure that Maya was safe. "What's the plan?" one of the bikers asked. "We'll stake out his house," Jack replied, his voice steady. "We'll keep an eye on him, make sure he knows we're watching. And if he tries anything, we'll be ready." Maya listened in silence, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't want to go back, didn't want to face her stepfather again. But she knew she had no choice. This was the only way to make sure he couldn't hurt her again. The next day, the bikers set their plan into motion. They took turns keeping watch outside her stepfather's house, making sure he didn't do anything to harm her. Maya stayed inside the compound, her nerves frayed, but she felt comforted by the presence of the bikers. They had her back. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at her. What if he found a way to get to her? What if he showed up at the compound? Days passed, and Maya's fear began to take over again. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She felt like she was always waiting for something bad to happen. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack called her into the garage. "We've got news," he said, his voice grim. "He's coming for you." Maya froze, panic seizing her chest. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's face hardened. "We do what we do best. We fight back." That night, the bikers gathered once again, preparing for whatever was to come. Maya stood in the corner, her heart racing as she watched the men and women she had come to trust get ready for a confrontation that she wasn't sure she was ready for. "We're going to stop him before he can hurt you," Jack said, his voice filled with determination. "No one is going to hurt you again, Maya." With those words, they mounted their motorcycles, ready for what lay ahead. The roar of engines filled the air as they sped off into the night, heading toward the place where Maya's past and her future were about to collide. The bikers weren't just riding to fight for a cause. They were riding to protect a little girl who had finally found the family she never knew she had. The bikers rode in perfect formation, the roar of their engines cutting through the night air like a storm. The lights from their motorcycles cast long shadows as they raced down the empty highway, their destination clear, the house where Maya's stepfather lived. She sat on the back of Jack's bike, her heart pounding in her chest. The fear that had been creeping up on her for days was now in full force. What would happen when they finally confronted him? Would he back down, or would the confrontation escalate into something far worse? Jack's grip tightened on the handlebars as they navigated through the winding roads, the glow of the town in the distance. He could feel Maya's tension, the way she gripped him, as though she were holding onto the last thread of hope that she could escape the nightmare that had been her life. "You're safe now," Jack said over his shoulder, his voice steady, but Maya could hear the resolve in his words. "We're going to end this." Maya nodded, trying to calm herself, but the knot in her stomach tightened. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew that her stepfather wasn't going to let go easily. He had been a constant presence of terror in her life, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, waiting for his chance to hurt her again. The group of bikers turned onto a narrow street, the headlights illuminating the old house in front of them. It looked different in the dark, more menacing, like a place that held memories of violence and control. Jack slowed his bike and signaled for the others to do the same. The engines went quiet, and for a moment, there was only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the distant hum of the town. "This is it," Jack said, his voice low. "Stay close. Don't do anything unless I say so." Maya's heart raced as she slid off the bike, her legs shaky. She had never imagined that the day would come when she would be standing in front of this house again. But now that she was here, she couldn't help but feel like she was about to face the biggest battle of her life. The bikers spread out, forming a tight perimeter around the house. Maya's eyes scanned the area, looking for any sign of her stepfather. Was he inside? Was he waiting for them? The door to the house opened, and out stepped a man. It wasn't her stepfather, but someone she recognized. A member of his crew. The man looked at them, his eyes widening when he saw the bikers. "What do you want?" he called out, his voice shaky. Jack stepped forward, his presence commanding. "We're here for Maya," he said, his voice cold. "You tell him to come out, or we'll make him." The man hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked back into the house, slamming the door behind him. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was coming. The bikers remained still, waiting for the next move. The door opened again, this time with more force. Her stepfather stepped out, his cold eyes locking onto Maya. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket that made him look even more imposing in the dim light. "What is this?" he sneered, his voice laced with contempt. "You think you can just show up here and take her from me?" Jack stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with authority. "You don't have a choice. This ends tonight." Maya could see the anger in her stepfather's eyes, the way his fists clenched at his sides. She knew he wasn't going to back down. "You think you can just walk in here and tell me what to do?" He spat, taking a step forward. "I'm the law around here. You think you're going to get away with this?" "You're not the law," Jack said calmly, his tone never wavering. "You're a coward who hides behind your badge and your fists. You're not welcome here anymore. It's time for you to leave." For a moment, there was silence, and Maya could feel her heart racing in her chest. She wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but she knew that she wasn't going to let him hurt her anymore. She wasn't going to be afraid of him anymore. Her stepfather's eyes flicked from Jack to the other bikers, who were standing silently in the background. He could see the resolve in their eyes, the unwavering determination that this was not a fight they were willing to lose. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he took a deep breath and sneered at Jack. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" He spat, his voice full of venom. "This is just the beginning." But Jack didn't flinch. "No, this is the end for you," he said, his voice unwavering. And with that, he turned, signaling to the bikers to follow him. Maya watched as her stepfather stood in the doorway, fuming with rage. But she felt no fear. She felt free. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. The bikers had kept their promise. She was safe. And no matter what her stepfather said, she knew that this chapter of her life was finally over. "I am not afraid anymore," Maya thought as she stood in the small, dimly lit room inside the bikers' compound. The door had closed behind her stepfather, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known in so long. The bikers had kept their promise. She was safe, and they weren't going to let anyone hurt her again. She could feel the weight of the fear that had clung to her for so long starting to lift, replaced by a quiet hope. But despite the comfort of the bikers' presence, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her stepfather wasn't done yet. He had always been a man who didn't take defeat lightly. He was dangerous, and though the bikers had driven him off, Maya knew he wouldn't stay away for long. As she sat on the edge of the couch, trying to calm her nerves, Jack walked in, his expression as serious as it had ever been. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and steady. Maya looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Your stepfather is a dangerous man," Jack began, sitting down across from her. "And though we've taken care of him for now, we need to be prepared. He's going to come back. He's not just going to let you go." Maya nodded, her mind racing. She had always known that her stepfather wouldn't just give up, but hearing it from Jack made the reality of it hit her all over again. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack leaned forward, his eyes filled with determination. "We stay ready. We make sure he knows that we'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. And we won't let him take you again." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Jack wasn't just talking about fighting back. He was talking about protecting her, no matter the cost. "We'll stand together," he said, his voice firm. "No one's getting past us." Maya felt a surge of gratitude towards Jack and the bikers. They had given her a chance to start over, a chance to finally be free of the terror her stepfather had instilled in her for so long. But deep down, she couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt. She had been running for so long, and now, these people, these bikers, had put themselves in harm's way to protect her. I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me, she said softly, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Jack reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You didn't ask for this, Maya, he said gently. None of us did. But we're here now, and we're not going anywhere. He stood up, walking toward the door. You don't have to face this alone. You're part of this family now. Maya watched him leave, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She was part of the family. The bikers had taken her in, and no matter what came next, she knew she wasn't going to be abandoned again. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and waiting. Maya stayed inside the compound, her every move watched over by the bikers, who made sure she was never alone. They had set up a system to keep an eye on her stepfather, following him from a distance, making sure he wasn't planning anything. But despite their vigilance, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. It wasn't just the fact that her stepfather had been a constant presence in her life. It was the way the bikers spoke, the way they moved. They were ready for whatever came next. And she was, too. As the sun set on the 5th day after the confrontation, Maya was sitting on the porch, the cool evening breeze brushing against her skin. She had been trying to focus on the present, trying to take things one day at a time, but the gnawing worry in her chest wouldn't let her rest. What if her stepfather showed up in the middle of the night? What if he came with a plan? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of motorcycles in the distance. Maya froze, her heart racing in her chest. She stood up quickly, looking toward the road. The roar of the engines grew louder, and as she stepped into the yard, she saw the familiar shapes of the bikers riding toward her. But something was different. They weren't riding in the usual tight formation. This time, there was a sense of urgency, a sense of purpose in their movements. Jack led the group, his face grim as he pulled his bike to a stop in front of the compound. He dismounted quickly, his eyes scanning the area. He's here, Jack said, his voice low. It's time. Maya's heart sank. She had known this moment was coming, but she wasn't prepared for it. Jack turned to the other bikers, giving them a brief nod. Get ready, he said, his tone serious. Stay calm, stay focused. We protect her, no matter what. The bikers moved with practiced precision, each one heading to their assigned positions. Maya stood frozen in place, her eyes wide with fear. But as Jack's eyes met hers, she felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't going to be a victim anymore. This was the moment that everything changed. This was the moment she finally took control of her life. The tension in the air was thick as the bikers took their positions, their engines still rumbling in the background, a constant reminder that things were about to escalate. Maya stood in the doorway, watching as Jack and the others quickly readied themselves. They were not just preparing for a fight, they were preparing for a war. The moment she had been dreading for days had arrived. Her stepfather had come for her, and this time, she was ready to stand her ground. Jack turned to her, his eyes intense but calm. Stay inside, he said firmly. We've got this. Maya nodded, though she didn't plan on staying hidden in the house. She had spent too long running, too long hiding. This was her fight now. And as much as she wanted to trust Jack and the others, she knew she needed to face her past on her own terms. She stepped back into the shadows of the house, careful not to make a sound. Her eyes stayed fixed on the bikers as they surrounded the compound. They weren't just protecting her, they were ready to fight for her. She knew they would do whatever it took to keep her safe. As the minutes ticked by, Maya's heart raced. She could hear the distant sound of a truck approaching, the engine sputtering and coughing as it grew louder. The bikers' movements grew more synchronized, their eyes scanning the surroundings, waiting for the moment they had all been preparing for. The truck came into view, and Maya could see the figure behind the wheel. Her stepfather. He had arrived. The truck slowed as it approached the gates of the compound, and Maya could see the smirk on his face through the window. He was confident. He was angry, and he was ready to take back what he thought was his. Jack was the first to step forward, his boots heavy on the gravel. The other bikers followed, forming a wall between Maya's stepfather and the compound. The two men locked eyes, and for a moment, it was as though time had stopped. You think you can just take my daughter from me? Maya's stepfather growled, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Jack didn't flinch. She's not yours, he said, his voice steady and unwavering. And she never will be again. The bikers' engines revved behind him, a loud reminder that they weren't backing down. Maya's stepfather scoffed and threw the truck into park, slamming the door open with a force that rattled the air. He stepped out, his large frame casting a shadow over the compound. The other bikers stood tall, their faces hardened, prepared for whatever came next. "You think you can just stand in my way?" he sneered, taking a step toward Jack. "I'll make sure you all regret this." Jack stood his ground, his eyes never leaving Maya's stepfather. "No one's afraid of you anymore." The words were simple, but they were enough. Maya watched from the doorway, her heart thumping in her chest. She had never seen Jack so calm, so sure of himself. He was in control. For the first time in years, Maya felt that same control begin to rise inside her. The anger, the fear, the helplessness, it was all fading away. Her stepfather took another step forward, his hand twitching at his side, as if he were ready to strike. But before he could move any closer, the sound of a motorcycle revved, and one of the bikers stepped forward, his eyes cold and fierce. "Stay away from him," the biker warned, his voice a low growl. Maya's stepfather looked at the biker, then back at Jack. The moment stretched, thick with tension, but it was clear that this wasn't a fight he wanted. He had come to intimidate, to reclaim what he thought was his, but the bikers weren't backing down. And Maya was no longer afraid. "This isn't your fight, and it's not your daughter," Jack said again, his voice louder now. "You're done here. Leave." Her stepfather hesitated, his fists clenched, but the presence of the bikers, standing strong and united, made him take a step back. He sneered one last time, his eyes flicking toward Maya, then turned and stormed back to his truck. The bikers watched him leave, their expressions unchanged. As his truck roared to life and drove away, Maya felt her breath escape her in a rush. It was over. For now, at least. She stepped out from the shadows, her legs still shaking, but she felt something she hadn't felt in years: power. Her stepfather had come to take her back, but he had been met with a wall of people who would never let him hurt her again. The bikers had kept their promise. She wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. She was someone who had fought back, someone who had people who cared enough to fight for her. Jack turned to her, his expression softening. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Yeah," she whispered. "I'm okay." The bikers began to gather their bikes, preparing to leave, but Maya felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was just the beginning. Her past was still a part of her, but now she had the strength to face it. And as long as she had the bikers by her side, she knew she would never be alone again. The days that followed the confrontation felt like a blur. Maya had been through so much, and for the first time in a long time, she felt as though she could breathe. The bikers had kept their promise, keeping her safe and protecting her from the man who had once controlled her life. But as much as she tried to enjoy the peace, the memories of her past lingered like a dark cloud. She couldn't forget what had happened. The nightmares still came, sometimes when she least expected it, but now she had something she hadn't had before, a sense of security. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. And she wasn't alone. Jack had become her anchor, the man who had kept his word and made sure she had a place to call home. Maya found herself spending more time with him and the others, learning about their lives, their pasts, and their loyalty to one another. The bikers were more than just a group of tough men and women on motorcycles. They were a family, and Maya was becoming a part of it. Still, there was a lingering fear inside her, a fear that her stepfather would come back, that the fight wasn't truly over. The bikers had made it clear that they wouldn't let him near her again, but Maya couldn't help but wonder if the danger was only just beginning. One evening, after a long day spent with the bikers, Maya sat outside on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool, and the silence was comforting. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the peace, but then the sound of motorcycles broke through the stillness. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she stood up, instinctively moving toward the edge of the porch. Jack and the others had warned her that if her stepfather ever tried to make a move again, they would be ready. But the question remained, what if they weren't ready enough? What if the danger was still out there, waiting for the perfect moment? Jack pulled up to the driveway, the rumble of his bike cutting through the quiet night air. He dismounted quickly, his face serious as he walked toward Maya. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. Maya nodded, trying to mask the anxiety she felt. "Yeah," she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. Jack stepped closer, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "We need to talk," he said. Maya's heart sank. She could tell something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked, her stomach tight with worry. Jack hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We've been hearing rumors. Word is, your stepfather's making moves. He's got people on the inside, people who know where we are." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had known it wasn't over, but hearing it out loud made the reality of it hit her harder than she expected. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means he's not done," Jack said firmly. "And it means we need to prepare. We can't let our guard down." Maya's mind raced. She had thought that once her stepfather was gone, she could finally start over, but now it seemed like the fight wasn't finished. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "We'll handle it," he said. "We've got your back. You don't have to face this alone." Maya nodded, though the fear in her chest didn't completely dissipate. The bikers had become her family, and she trusted them with her life, but the fear of what might happen next still gnawed at her. Jack turned and called over to the other bikers, his voice steady as he gave instructions. "Stay sharp. We don't know what they're planning, but we can't take any chances." The bikers immediately moved into action, their calm demeanor betraying the urgency of the situation. Maya watched them work, their synchronized movements and quiet determination filling her with a sense of awe. These were people who had fought their own battles and knew how to protect what mattered. And now, they were here to protect her. As the bikers set up their defenses and strategized, Maya stayed close to Jack, her mind running through all the worst-case scenarios. But no matter how much she worried, she knew that she couldn't run from her past forever. It would always be there, lurking in the shadows. The only thing she could do now was face it head-on, and with the bikers by her side, she knew she had the strength to do it. The night passed without incident, and by morning, the tension was still thick in the air. Maya woke early, unable to sleep, and stepped outside to watch the sunrise. The cool breeze brushed against her skin, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel a small measure of peace. But as the sun rose higher in the sky, she knew the calm wouldn't last long. Her stepfather wasn't going to give up, and the bikers would need to be ready. She had been through so much, but the hardest part was still to come. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not now. The sound of engines revving in the distance broke her thoughts, and she turned to see the bikers gathering, preparing for what was coming. Jack approached her, his face hard with determination. "We're ready," he said. "Stay close. We won't let him get to you." Maya felt a surge of gratitude toward him. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't facing it alone. The bikers had become her family, and together, they would fight for her safety. No matter what happened next, she knew she was stronger than ever. She wasn't going to let fear control her life anymore. The air was thick with tension as the bikers gathered around their bikes, ready for whatever was coming. Maya stood at the edge of the compound, her hands trembling slightly as she watched them prepare. Jack was speaking with the others, his face stern and focused, giving out instructions with the same calm authority he always carried. The bikers were ready. They had fought for her before, but this time, it felt different. The air felt heavier, the danger more imminent. Maya could feel the knot in her stomach tightening with each passing moment. She wanted to be strong, to be brave, but the weight of everything that had happened, everything that was still hanging over her, made it hard to keep her thoughts clear. Her stepfather had been ruthless before, and now he had made it personal. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had the bikers. She had Jack. And as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the compound, Maya realized that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't afraid. Her stepfather had tried to break her, to control her, but she was stronger now, and she would face him head-on if it came to that. Jack approached her, his eyes locking onto hers with a seriousness that matched the gravity of the situation. "Stay close," he said, his voice steady. "We're not letting him get to you." Maya nodded, her heart pounding as she stood by his side. She had trusted Jack and the others from the beginning, but now, more than ever, she realized how much they had come to mean to her. They weren't just bikers, they were her family. The sound of engines revving in the distance snapped her from her thoughts, and she looked up, her breath catching in her throat as the first of the motorcycles appeared on the horizon. A convoy of black bikes sped down the road, their lights cutting through the night like a line of soldiers heading into battle. Maya felt a surge of hope and fear rise inside her. This was it. The moment had arrived. Jack turned to her. His expression softened. For just a moment. You're going to be okay, he said, his words a promise, a shield. We've got this. The bikers formed a tight circle around the compound, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. The sound of the engines faded as they came to a stop, and the air grew still once more. Jack gave a quick nod to the others, and without a word, they began to move, positioning themselves in strategic spots around the property. Maya's heart raced as she watched them. She knew what they were doing. They were preparing for a fight. Maya's stepfather was coming, and the bikers were determined to stop him before he could reach her. She could hear the sound of his truck now, the rumble of the engine getting closer and closer. Her stepfather had been unpredictable, always on the move, always dangerous. But tonight, it felt like the world had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, the power was no longer in his hands. It was in hers. The bikers had given her the strength to fight back, to stand tall, to take control of her own destiny. Jack turned back to her, his face serious. Stay inside, he ordered gently. It's going to get ugly, and I need you to be safe. Maya hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She had never been the type to sit back and watch others fight her battles, but she knew Jack was right. She needed to let them do their work. Jack gave her one last reassuring glance before turning to join the others. Maya watched them move with precision, their every action calculated and swift. The bikers were ready, and so was she. The truck came into view, its headlights blinding in the darkness. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the vehicle slowly came to a stop outside the gates. The sound of the engine died, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, the door slammed open, and her stepfather stepped out, his eyes scanning the compound. Maya's stepfather was a big man, broad-shouldered and intimidating, his rough features twisted with anger. But tonight, there was something different in his eyes, a flicker of hesitation. He wasn't expecting the bikers to be here, and he wasn't prepared for the fight that was about to unfold. Jack stepped forward, his posture confident, his eyes locked on her stepfather. This is where it ends, Jack said, his voice unwavering. You don't get to hurt her anymore. Her stepfather sneered, taking a step forward. You think you can stop me? He spat. You think you can just walk in here and take control? Jack didn't flinch. You're not in control anymore. She's free, and she's never coming back to you. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm about to break. Maya could see her stepfather's hands twitching, as if he were ready to strike, but the bikers were already in position, ready to stop him. And Maya felt the weight of everything that had happened. The fear, the pain, the trauma, all of it melting away. She wasn't alone anymore. She was free. The bikers weren't just fighting for her. They were fighting for her future, for the life she deserved. Her stepfather took a step back, his face twisting with rage. He was cornered. The bikers had won. And as he stormed back toward his truck, Maya felt a sense of relief wash over her. This was it. The fight was over. And for the first time in a long time, she could breathe freely. Her stepfather had lost, and Maya had won. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the compound as Maya stood in the yard, her feet planted firmly on the ground. The events of the past few days felt like a whirlwind. Her stepfather had been defeated, but there was still a lingering weight in the air. The bikers had kept their word, keeping her safe, but she knew that things were far from over. She couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't finished yet. As Maya stood there, the sounds of engines revving in the distance reached her ears. The bikers were preparing to leave, ready to patrol the area and ensure her safety. She had come to trust them, these men and women who had become her family. They were loyal, and they had promised to protect her no matter what. Jack approached, his face serious as he pulled up on his bike. He dismounted with practiced ease, his leather jacket creaking as he stood up straight. His eyes met Maya's, and for a moment, they shared a quiet understanding. You okay? He asked, his voice low and steady. Maya nodded, but the knot in her stomach was still there. Yeah, I think so. It's just hard to believe it's finally over. Jack's expression softened. It's not over until you feel safe, Maya. We'll be watching. We'll always be watching. His words were meant to reassure her, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows. She had spent so long running, so long hiding, that the idea of true safety felt like an illusion. Are you sure he's not going to come back? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's gaze hardened, and his jaw clenched. He's not. He knows better than to come near you again. Maya swallowed hard, trying to push the fear down, but it still lingered. She had learned over the years to live with fear, to always expect the worst. But now, for the first time, she wasn't running. She was standing her ground. She was ready to fight. You're not alone anymore, Jack said, his voice steady and comforting. You've got us, and we'll make sure you never have to go through that again. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She had always dreamed of being free, of escaping the control and fear that had ruled her life for so long. But now, standing in the safety of the compound, she realized something important. She wasn't just free. She was strong, and she wasn't going to let her past define her anymore. Thank you, Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I would have done without you all. Jack smiled, a small but reassuring gesture. You don't have to thank us. We're family, and family looks out for each other. Maya smiled back, feeling a sense of warmth in her chest. For the first time in so long, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The bikers had given her a chance at a new life, a chance to start over, and she wasn't going to waste it. As Jack turned to leave, Maya stayed behind, standing in the yard, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. The compound was quiet now, peaceful, but she knew that the next few days would be filled with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. She couldn't let her guard down completely. Not yet, but she also knew that with the bikers by her side, she could face anything. She had never felt so strong, so ready to take on the world. The fear that had once held her captive no longer had a hold on her. She was free, and that freedom, that strength, was hers to hold on to. As the day went on, Maya spent time with the bikers, learning more about their lives, their stories, and their loyalty to each other. They were more than just a group of people who rode motorcycles. They were a family, bound together by loyalty, respect, and a shared understanding of what it meant to protect those they cared about. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange light over the compound, Maya sat on the porch, watching the bikers go about their business. She could see the way they moved, the way they worked together to make sure everything was in order. They were ready for anything. And for the first time in her life, Maya felt like she was ready too. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor. And she was going to live her life on her terms, with the strength and support of the family she had found. The night was peaceful, and Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't alone. She wasn't afraid. She was home. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet moments and constant vigilance. Maya had settled into a routine with the bikers, finding comfort in their presence, but there was always a lingering edge to the atmosphere. The events with her stepfather had shaken her, and though the bikers had promised to protect her, a part of Maya couldn't help but feel like danger was still out there, just waiting for the right moment to strike. She spent her mornings working alongside the bikers, helping with small tasks, getting to know the men and women who had taken her in. Their lives were nothing like hers, filled with a sense of purpose and camaraderie, and yet, they had accepted her without question. It was more than she had ever imagined. Jack had kept his word, ensuring that Maya was always surrounded by people who cared for her. He had become a steady presence in her life, his guidance providing her with the strength she needed to keep moving forward. She was no longer a frightened girl running from her past. She was a part of something bigger now, a part of a family who would do anything to keep her safe. But as much as Maya tried to embrace this new life, the fear still crept in. She knew her stepfather was out there, and though the bikers had been watching, she couldn't shake the thought that he was waiting for the right moment to make his move. It was early one morning, as Maya was sitting on the porch, watching the sky lighten with the first rays of dawn, that Jack walked up behind her. His face was serious, his eyes scanning the surroundings as he approached. "We've got word," he said, his voice calm but firm. Maya turned to him, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean? What's happened?" Jack hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Your stepfather's been making calls. He's still trying to find a way to get to you. We can't ignore it anymore. We need to be ready." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The dread that had been building inside her suddenly erupted, her pulse quickening. "Is he coming here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack's expression softened, but his eyes remained focused. "We don't know, but we're not taking chances. We've been on alert, but now it's time to make sure we have all the bases covered." Maya nodded, though she felt a lump form in her throat. She had always hoped that her stepfather would just disappear, that he would leave her alone. But now, the reality was setting in. He wasn't just going to give up. Jack gave her a reassuring look. "We're going to handle this. I'm not letting him anywhere near you." His words, though filled with confidence, did little to ease the fear that had taken root in Maya's chest. She knew the bikers would fight for her, but the thought of facing her past head-on, of confronting the man who had terrorized her for so long, filled her with dread. The next few days were filled with intense preparation. Jack and the others mapped out their strategy, positioning themselves at key points around the compound, ensuring that every angle was covered. Maya stayed inside most of the time, her nerves frayed as she waited for something to happen. She couldn't sit still. She couldn't shake. The feeling that her stepfather was close, that he was waiting for the right moment to strike. Jack kept checking in on her, his presence a constant reassurance. "You're stronger than you think, Maya," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch. "You've already faced your demons. Whatever comes next, you'll be ready." Maya wanted to believe him, but the fear still lingered. It wasn't just about her stepfather anymore. It was about everything she had lost, everything she had endured. As the sun began to set on the third evening of their preparations, the sound of motorcycles filled the air. The bikers gathered in the yard, ready for whatever came next. Maya stepped outside, her heart pounding in her chest as she joined them. Jack was giving final instructions, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Stay sharp," he said, his eyes scanning the area. "We don't know what's coming, but we'll be ready for it." Maya stood beside him, the weight of the moment settling in. She wasn't a helpless girl anymore. She had survived the worst, and now she was ready to face whatever was next. She was no longer running from her past. She was going to fight for her future. As the bikers mounted their bikes and revved their engines, Maya took a deep breath. She had spent so long being afraid, but now, with the bikers by her side, she felt something new. Strength, determination, a sense of belonging. She was ready, and whatever happened next, she knew she wasn't facing it alone. The roar of the engines grew louder as the bikers began to move, heading toward the unknown. Maya followed behind, her steps steady as she walked toward the future she had fought so hard to reclaim. Her past might have defined her for a time, but it wasn't going to control her anymore. She was free, and she was going to keep fighting for that freedom. The night was heavy with anticipation as Maya stood beside Jack and the other bikers, the distant hum of engines filling the air. The compound, which had been a safe haven for the past few days, now felt like the calm before a storm. The bikers were in full gear, their eyes focused, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Maya could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. Her stepfather was coming. She had known this day would come, but now that it was here, the fear that had been lingering in the back of her mind was starting to creep forward. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm and reassuring. "You're not alone," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We've got your back. We won't let him take you." Maya nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She had come so far, and she wasn't going to let her past define her. Not anymore. She wasn't the scared little girl who had run away from her stepfather. She was stronger now, and she had a family. These bikers who had become her family, and she was ready to fight for the life she deserved. As the night grew darker, the sound of a truck engine approached, its low rumble breaking the silence. Maya's heart began to race, but she held her ground. She wasn't running. She was standing tall, with the bikers surrounding her, ready for whatever came next. The truck slowed as it came into view, and Maya saw her stepfather's face in the driver's seat. His expression was twisted with anger, and for a moment, she saw the man who had terrorized her life for so long. But this time, there was no fear. She wasn't running anymore. The truck came to a halt, and Maya's stepfather stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel as he approached the compound. Jack stepped forward, his presence commanding, as the other bikers spread out behind him, forming a wall of protection around Maya. Her stepfather stopped a few feet away, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of the bikers. "You think you can just take my daughter from me?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can just walk in and take control?" Jack didn't flinch. "She's not your daughter," he said firmly, his voice calm but unwavering. "You lost that right a long time ago. You don't get to control her anymore." Maya stood beside Jack, her heart pounding in her chest, but she felt the strength that had been building inside her. This was the moment. This was her fight. Her stepfather's eyes flicked from Jack to the other bikers, and for a moment, it looked like he might back down. But then he took a step forward, his fists clenching at his sides. "I'm not done with you," he growled, his voice low and threatening. Jack's eyes hardened. "You're done. This ends tonight." The bikers moved into position, their eyes locked on Maya's stepfather, ready for anything. Maya felt a surge of adrenaline as she stood tall, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was ready. "You're not going anywhere," Jack said, his voice cold and final. "Not until we're sure you've learned your lesson." Her stepfather sneered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't in control. He was surrounded, and he had nowhere to run. The standoff lasted for a few long moments, the silence thick and heavy, before her stepfather took a step back, his jaw clenched tight in frustration. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice shaking with rage. "I'll be back, and when I do, you won't be ready." Jack didn't flinch. "You'll never get that chance. You're done here." With a final glare at Maya, her stepfather turned and stormed back to his truck. The bikers didn't move, their eyes watching him intently as he climbed into the vehicle and drove away, disappearing into the night. Maya stood frozen for a moment, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, before she finally exhaled, her body relaxing as the weight of the situation began to lift. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had faced her past, and she had won. Jack turned to her, his face softening. "You did good," he said, his voice low but filled with pride. Maya smiled, a genuine smile, the kind she hadn't been able to offer in a long time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you all." Jack nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet understanding. "You're family now, Maya, and family protects each other." The bikers gathered around, their presence a solid reminder that Maya was no longer alone. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she was finally free. As the night fell silent again, the bikers began to disperse, the tension in the air slowly fading. Maya stood with Jack for a moment longer, watching the stars appear in the sky above them. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a sense of peace. The past was behind her. And the future? The future was hers to shape. The days that followed the confrontation with Maya's stepfather were quieter than she had anticipated, yet the tension still lingered in the air. As the bikers settled back into their routines, Maya could feel the weight of the past gradually lifting, but the fear, although muted, remained. Her stepfather had been forced to back down, but Maya knew the fight was far from over. She wasn't naive enough to believe that the danger had simply disappeared. The bikers had done their part. Jack had done his part, but there was still a gnawing feeling inside her that told her to stay vigilant. Each morning, as the sun rose and the compound came to life with the sound of engines and the chatter of the bikers, Maya found herself sitting on the porch, her mind racing with the what-ifs. What if her stepfather came back? What if he had another plan? Could she keep her new family safe? The bikers, however, were unwavering in their commitment to her. They had given her a sense of security, something she hadn't known for years. The days passed with the bikers checking in, making sure everything was in place, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon. They worked in perfect synchronization, a machine made up of strong, loyal individuals who would do anything to protect one another. It was more than just a club. It was a bond forged through years of loyalty and respect. Maya, for the first time in her life, was part of something that wasn't based on fear. It was based on trust, and it was something she was learning to embrace. She began helping around the compound more, taking on small tasks, and gradually becoming part of the everyday life of the bikers. They had their own way of doing things, their own language, but Maya was beginning to understand. They worked together, they fought together, and they protected each other, no matter what. One afternoon, Jack approached her while she was helping repair a bike. His face was unreadable, his expression serious. "Maya, we need to talk," he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of urgency. Maya stood up from the bike, wiping her hands on a rag, and met his gaze. She could feel the shift in the air. "What's going on?" she asked, her stomach tightening. "There's been a change," Jack said, his eyes scanning the yard as if ensuring no one was listening. "We've gotten word from one of our guys. Your stepfather's been spotted in a nearby town. He's not giving up." Maya's heart sank. She had been trying to push the thought of him out of her mind, trying to believe that he was gone for good. But now, hearing it from Jack, the fear came flooding back. "What does that mean? Is he coming for me?" Maya's voice trembled slightly. Jack nodded. "We don't know what he's planning, but we need to be prepared. I'm not going to let him get anywhere near you. But we can't afford to be caught off guard either." Maya's mind raced. The comfort she had found over the past few days, the sense of safety, felt like it was being ripped away in an instant. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the bikers who had made her one of their own, the family she had longed for. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "We stay vigilant," Jack replied. "We make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. You won't face this alone, Maya. We're all in this together." Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had spent too long being afraid, too long hiding from her past. She wasn't going to let fear control her any longer. She was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for the family she had found. That night, the bikers gathered, discussing their strategy. They weren't just going to wait around. They were going to take the fight to her stepfather before he had a chance to strike. Maya sat among them, feeling the warmth of their presence, the way they all looked out for each other. It wasn't just talk. It was the way they lived. It was their code. Jack turned to her as the meeting wrapped up. "Get some rest, Maya," he said, his voice softer now. "You're going to need your strength for what's coming." Maya nodded, though she didn't feel tired. The adrenaline was already building in her, and sleep seemed like a distant memory. Instead, she walked outside, looking up at the stars, as the bikers went about preparing for what was to come. The wind was cool against her skin, and the sounds of the night seemed to soothe her, calming the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. But she knew the calm wouldn't last forever. The battle was coming, and she had to be ready. She wasn't alone. She had the bikers. She had a family now. And no matter what her stepfather did, she was going to stand her ground. This time, she wasn't running. She was fighting. As she walked back inside, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she was ready for whatever came next. The sun was beginning to rise over the compound, casting long shadows across the yard as the bikers prepared for the final confrontation. Maya stood at the edge of the porch, her heart pounding in her chest, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was a different kind of tension, one that came with the anticipation of the end. The bikers had already made their plans, their positions set. Maya knew this was it. The final battle to protect the life she had started to rebuild. Her stepfather was not going to back down. He had made that clear. But neither would she, and neither would the bikers. Maya wasn't running anymore. The moment of truth had arrived. Jack stepped up beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon, his posture firm. The others were already in position, but Jack made sure Maya wasn't left behind. "You ready?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an underlying urgency. Maya nodded, her hands gripping the railing as she stared out at the empty road leading to the compound. "I'm ready," she said quietly, though her heart was racing. Jack gave her a reassuring look. "We've got you. Always." The sound of a truck engine broke through the silence, and Maya's pulse quickened. She turned to Jack, who gave a slight nod, signaling to the others. The bikers were ready. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The truck came into view, the headlights blinding in the early morning light. Maya's stepfather's vehicle. He was here. The bikers didn't flinch as the truck slowed to a stop outside the compound gates. They were ready. For whatever came next. Maya stood still, feeling the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was about to unfold. She had never been this certain of anything before. The fear that had haunted her for so long had been replaced by a fierce determination. She was standing tall now, ready to face the man who had once controlled her life. The truck door slammed open, and out stepped her stepfather. His imposing figure stood tall, his cold eyes locking onto Maya. For a brief moment, their gazes met, and Maya felt the chill of the past wash over her. But she didn't look away. She wouldn't. Jack stepped forward, his boots crunching the gravel underfoot as he walked toward Maya's stepfather. The bikers moved into position behind him, forming a protective barrier around Maya. Her stepfather took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, his voice dripping with anger. "I'm not going anywhere. She's mine." Jack stood tall, his voice steady and unwavering. "No, she's not," he said, his eyes never leaving Maya's stepfather. "She's free, and she's never coming back to you." The bikers stood firm, their eyes locked on her stepfather, ready for the first move. Maya's stepfather's jaw tightened as he took a step back, but he didn't back down. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You haven't seen the last of me. I'll make sure you regret this." Jack didn't flinch. "There's nothing left for you here. You've lost." The silence was thick, the tension unbearable. Maya could feel her stepfather's presence, but it was fading. The power he once held over her was gone. He had no hold on her anymore. Jack's voice rang out again, calm and final. "It's over. You can leave now and never come back." For a moment, it seemed like her stepfather might push further, but he finally turned, his face twisted in anger. He got back into the truck and slammed the door shut, the engine roaring to life as he sped off into the distance. The bikers watched him go, their faces unreadable, but Maya could see the relief in their eyes. It was done. Her stepfather was gone for good. Maya exhaled deeply, her body relaxing as the adrenaline began to fade. She wasn't sure how long she had been holding her breath, but it felt like a lifetime. The bikers began to move back to the compound, their job done, but Maya stayed still for a moment longer. The sun was fully up now, the warmth of its light spreading over the yard. She looked around at the bikers, her family now, the people who had fought for her and protected her. They had kept their word. She was safe. She was free. As she turned to walk back inside, Jack fell into step beside her, his presence comforting. "You did good, Maya," he said, his voice quiet but filled with pride. Maya smiled, her heart full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you all." Jack gave her a gentle nod. "You're strong, Maya. You've always been. We just helped you realize it." She nodded, the weight of the past finally beginning to lift. She had faced her demons, and with the help of the bikers, she had defeated them. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about living. Maya was free to live her life, to create her future, and for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to do just that. As she walked into the compound, surrounded by her new family, she knew that no matter what happened next, she was no longer running. She was home.